I was 26 years old when I learned what it felt like to be invisible and terrifying at the same time. It happened on a Tuesday evening in March, one of those cold spring nights when the sun sets too early and the streets empty out before dinner. I'd just left the gym, my gym bag slung over my shoulder, wearing a black hoodie because the temperature had dropped. I remember the exact moment everything changed. A woman was walking toward me on the sidewalk, pushing a stroller. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes widened. She actually grabbed the stroller handles tighter and crossed to the other side of the street without breaking stride. I stood there, confused, watching her hurry away. Then it happened again. An elderly couple approaching from the opposite direction took one look at me and veered into a driveway, pretending to check their phones until I passed. That's when I realized what was happening. That's when I understood. My name is Marcus and I'm 6'4", and I have broad shoulders from years of swimming and basketball. I keep my head shaved because I started bulking at 23 and decided to own it. And I'm black. In that moment, wearing that hoodie in that neighborhood at dusk, I became every stereotype, every fear, every news story that people had absorbed without questioning. I wasn't Marcus anymore, the guy who cried during Pixar movies and volunteered at the animal shelter on Sundays. I was just a threat, a reason to cross the street, a reason to clutch your purse tighter, a reason to walk faster. I'd dealt with racism before, the comments from teachers who were surprised I was good at math, the security guards who followed me in stores, the women who locked their car doors when I walked past in parking lots. But something about that evening hit differently. Maybe it was because I'd just had a good workout and felt strong and confident. Maybe it was because I'd been having a genuinely good day. Or maybe it was because it happened 3 times in the span of 2 blocks, and by the 3rd time, I felt something inside me start to crack. I made it home to my apartment and stood in the shower for 40 minutes, letting the hot water run over me until it turned cold. I kept thinking about my mother's voice, the conversations we'd had since I was a teenager. Don't wear hoodies, keep your hands visible, smile more so people know you're friendly, move slowly. Don't make sudden movements, be twice as good to get half as far. I'd heard it all my life, and I'd followed the rules. But that night, I realized the rules didn't matter. I could do everything right and still be seen as everything wrong. The next few weeks were hard. I started noticing things I'd trained myself not to see. The way people's bodies tensed when I entered an elevator. The way conversations quieted when I walked into the office break room. The way my white coworkers could show up to work looking however they wanted, while I had to carefully curate every aspect of my appearance to seem approachable, professional, non-threatening. I was exhausted, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the bone-deep weariness that comes from constantly performing, constantly managing other people's comfort, constantly making yourself smaller so others can feel bigger. I started taking different routes home from the gym, routes that were longer but better lit with more people around. I thought maybe if there were more witnesses I'd be safer. Not from crime, but from being seen as the crime. I switched to wearing bright colors, even though I hated how visible they made me feel. I started saying hello to everyone I passed, trying to project friendliness, trying to prove I was harmless. It was humiliating, but it felt necessary. About a month after that first incident, I was walking home on one of my new routes. It was around 8 in the evening, and I'd just finished a late session at the gym. I was tired, both physically and emotionally. I'd had a rough day at work where a new client had asked to speak to someone else on my team, someone more senior, even though I was literally the senior developer on the project. My manager had tried to smooth it over, but we both knew what had really happened. I was wearing a gray hoodie this time because it was raining and I'd forgotten my jacket, and I honestly didn't have the energy to care anymore. I was walking down Maple Street, which runs through a mixed neighborhood of old Victorians converted into apartments and small businesses. There's a coffee shop on the corner that I like, a used bookstore, a vintage clothing place. It's usually pretty quiet at night. As I walked, I saw a young guy coming toward me from the opposite direction. He was white, maybe 23 or 24, with light brown hair that fell across his forehead and wire-rimmed glasses. He was wearing a pea coat and carrying a messenger bag covered in patches and pins. I could see him from about half a block away. and I prepared myself for the usual routine. I'd cross the street first this time, save him the trouble. But then something strange happened. As we got closer, instead of tensing up or moving away, he maintained his path. He was walking straight toward me, and he was looking at me. Not looking through me, not looking past me, but actually seeing me. When we were about 10 feet apart, he smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a placating smile, but a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. And then he said, "Hey, rough night for a walk, huh? This rain is brutal." I stopped walking. I literally stopped in my tracks because I was so surprised. He stopped too, adjusting his messenger bag on his shoulder. Up close, I could see that his glasses were spotted with rain, and he had this scattering of freckles across his nose. His eyes were hazel, more green than brown, and they were kind. That's the word that came to mind. Kind. "Yeah," I managed to say, my voice rougher than I intended. "Forgot my jacket." "The worst," he said, and he was still smiling. "I'm Ethan, by the way. I live in the building on the corner, the Blue Victorian. I've seen you walking past a few times. You go to Ironworks Gym, right? I've been thinking about joining." I was still processing the fact that he'd approached me, that he was talking to me like I was a person, like I was someone worth knowing. "Marcus," I said. "Yeah, Ironworks is good. They have decent equipment, and it's not too crowded if you go after 7. "Good to know," Ethan said. "I'm trying to get back into a routine. I used to run, but I destroyed my knee last year, so I'm looking for alternatives." He paused, pushing his wet hair out of his eyes. "This is probably weird, but do you want to grab coffee? The shop on the corner is still open, and I could use something warm. My treat as a thanks for the gym recommendation." I should have said no. I should have made up an excuse and kept walking. But there was something about the way he asked, casual and genuine, like it was the most natural thing in the world to invite a stranger for coffee on a rainy Tuesday night. Like he wasn't afraid of me at all. Like he actually wanted to talk to me. "Sure," I heard myself say. "Coffee sounds good." We walked the half block to the coffee shop together, and Ethan talked the whole way. He was a graphic designer working mostly from home, which explained why he was out at odd hours. He'd moved to the neighborhood 6 months ago after breaking up with his ex and needing a fresh start. He liked the bookstore because they had a good poetry section. He was learning to cook but was terrible at it, and had set off his smoke alarm 3 times in the past month. He talked easily, comfortably, and I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't in weeks. The coffee shop was called The Grind, one of those places with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. We ordered, Ethan insisting on paying, and settled into a corner with 2 large coffees. Ethan got some elaborate caramel thing, while I stuck with black coffee. We sat across from each other at a small wooden table that wobbled slightly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. We talked for 2 hours. Ethan asked me about my work, and he actually listened to my explanations of software architecture and coding languages without his eyes glazing over. He told me about his design projects, showing me some of his work on his phone, these beautiful minimalist posters for local bands and theater productions. We discovered we both loved terrible horror movies and had strong opinions about pizza toppings. We argued good-naturedly about whether Chicago or New York had better architecture. We compared notes on the neighborhood, the good restaurants, the places to avoid. What struck me most was how easy it was. Ethan never asked me to explain myself or justify my existence. He never brought up race or made awkward comments about having black friends. He never treated me like I was different or dangerous or other. He just treated me like a person, like someone he wanted to know. And God, I hadn't realized how much I needed that until it was happening. When the barista started stacking chairs, we realized how late it had gotten. We walked out together into the night, and the rain had stopped. The streets were slick and reflective under the streetlights, and everything smelled clean and fresh. "I live just up here," I said, pointing toward my building 3 blocks away. "I'll walk with you," Ethan said, "if that's okay." It was more than okay. We walked slowly, neither of us seeming to want the evening to end. At my building, we stood under the awning, and there was this moment of hesitation. Ethan pushed his hands into his coat pockets and looked at me with those kind eyes. "I really enjoyed this," he said. "Would you want to do it again sometime?" Maybe actually plan it instead of ambushing you on the street? I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. I'd like that. We exchanged numbers, and as Ethan walked away, he turned back once and waved. I stood there watching him go, this slight figure in a peacoat disappearing around the corner, and I felt something shift inside me. Hope, maybe, or possibility. The sense that not everyone saw me as a threat, that not everyone crossed the street. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and I fell into a pattern. We'd meet for coffee, or we'd grab dinner at one of the neighborhood restaurants. We'd walk through the park on weekends, or we'd hit up the used bookstore and spend hours browsing. Ethan introduced me to his favorite spots, these hidden gems I'd never noticed even though I'd lived in the area for 3 years. A tiny Vietnamese place with incredible pho, a record store in someone's basement, a community garden where volunteers could help out on Saturday mornings. With Ethan, I started to see the neighborhood differently. It wasn't just a place where people avoided me. It was a community, full of interesting people and possibilities. And slowly, I started to feel less invisible, less like a threat. Ethan had this way of grounding me, of reminding me that I was more than other people's fears and prejudices. We didn't talk about race directly for a while. It hung there between us, this unspoken thing. But Ethan never pushed. He was patient, letting me open up in my own time. It wasn't until about 2 months into our friendship that I finally told him about that night, about the people crossing the street, about how small and angry and hurt it had made me feel. We were at my apartment, sitting on my couch with takeout containers spread across the coffee table. I'd been telling him about my day, about another microaggression at work, and suddenly it all came spilling out. Everything I'd been holding in, the exhaustion, the performance, the constant vigilance, the way I had to think about things my white friends never considered, the way I'd trained myself to be smaller, quieter, less threatening. Ethan listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and I worried I'd said too much, that I'd made things weird. But then he reached over and took my hand. His hand was smaller than mine, his fingers pale against my dark skin, and he held on tight. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry that's your reality. I'm sorry people are afraid of you for no reason. I'm sorry you have to work twice as hard to be seen as half as good. And I'm sorry that me not being afraid of you is somehow remarkable, because it shouldn't be. You shouldn't have to be grateful that someone treats you like a human being." Something in my chest cracked open at those words. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them, to have someone acknowledge what I was going through without making it about them or getting defensive. Ethan just sat there, holding my hand, being present with me in my pain. "That first night," I said, my voice rough, "when you walked toward me instead of away. Do you know what that meant? Do you know what it felt like to have someone see me and not be afraid?" Ethan squeezed my hand. "I saw you," he said simply. This tall, beautiful man walking in the rain, looking like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. "I wanted to know you. I wanted to talk to you. And yeah, I noticed you were black, but that wasn't scary to me. That was just part of who you are. What scared me was the possibility that you'd tell me to get lost or think I was weird for approaching you." "I thought you were brave," I admitted. "Crazy, but brave." Ethan laughed. "I'm not brave. I'm just a guy who saw someone interesting and took a chance. Best decision I ever made." That night marked a shift in our relationship. The friendship we'd been building started to feel like something more. The casual touches lingered longer. The eye contact became more intense. The goodbyes at my door stretched out, neither of us wanting to part. I'd known for a while that I was attracted to Ethan, but I'd been afraid to acknowledge it, afraid to risk what we had. But now, sitting there with him on my couch, his hand in mine, I couldn't deny it anymore. "Ethan," I said, and my voice came out barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something." He turned to face me fully, and I could see my own feelings reflected in his eyes. "Yeah? I like you," I said, "more than as a friend. And if you don't feel the same way, that's okay. But I needed to say it because I can't keep pretending that I don't think about you all the time, that I don't look forward to seeing you more than anything else in my day, that I don't want this to be something more." Ethan's face broke into this huge smile, and he moved closer. "Marcus," he said, I've been waiting for you to say that for weeks. I like you too. So much. I didn't want to push because I know we're in different places, and I didn't want to mess up what we have, but yes, God, yes. I want this to be something more. I kissed him then, leaning in and pressing my lips to his, and it felt like coming home. Ethan kissed me back, his hands coming up to cup my face, and everything else fell away. All the fear, all the exhaustion, all the weight I'd been carrying. In that moment, there was just us, just this connection we'd built, just the possibility of something beautiful. We took things slow after that. We went on actual dates, holding hands in public even though I was nervous about it at first. Ethan was patient with my anxiety, understanding when I needed to let go in certain neighborhoods, never making me feel bad about it. He educated himself, reading books and articles about racial justice, asking questions when appropriate, but never making his education my responsibility. He showed up for me in ways I hadn't known I needed, but it wasn't one-sided. Ethan had his own struggles, his own vulnerabilities. He dealt with anxiety and depression, legacy gifts from a difficult childhood. There were days when he couldn't get out of bed, when the world felt too heavy. On those days, I learned to be there for him the way he'd been there for me. I'd bring him food and sit with him in the quiet. I'd remind him that he was loved, that he was enough, that the darkness wouldn't last forever. We learned each other's rhythms and needs. We built something real, something solid. And slowly, I started to heal. Not completely. The world didn't stop being racist just because I fell in love. But I had someone in my corner, someone who saw me fully and loved me anyway, someone who walked toward me when others crossed the street. It's been a year now since that rainy night when Ethan approached me on the sidewalk. We're living together in a bigger apartment, one with space for both of our stuff and a second bedroom that Ethan uses as a studio. We've built a life together, complete with inside jokes and shared routines and plans for the future. We've met each other's families, navigated the complexities and occasional awkwardness that comes with interracial relationships. We've had fights and makeups and moments of profound connection. I still deal with racism. I still have days when I'm exhausted from performing, from managing other people's comfort. I still have moments when I feel invisible and threatening at the same time. But now, I come home to Ethan. I come home to someone who sees me, really sees me, and loves what he finds. Someone who reminds me that I'm more than other people's fears. Someone who chose to walk toward me instead of away. That's what love is, I think. It's choosing to see someone fully, to approach them with openness instead of fear. It's taking a chance on a stranger in the rain. It's holding someone's hand when they're falling apart. It's showing up day after day and saying, I see you, I choose you, I love you. Everyone else might cross the street, but I'm walking toward you, always toward you.